Hello, everyone. We'll get started in just 1 minute. At the top of the hour, we'll let a few more people come in. All right. It looks like there's no one else entering the room, so I think we're good to start, Paul.
Great. People generally come in, as you know, over time. So we'll get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today for our presentation on academic leveling. My name is Paul Millette, and I am the director of EMA, which is the European, Middle East, and African operations for Peregrine. I'm located in Paris. You can see my little Eiffel Tower behind me. So we're at the end of our day. So good morning to some of you and good afternoon to some, and maybe even good evening to others. So thank you again for joining us. As I mentioned, I work with Peregrine in this side of on this side of the globe. I also work, of course, with schools in the United States and elsewhere in Asia as well. I come to Peregrine from a number of years of academic experience, both on the administrative side as well as teaching side. So I have some of the experience that maybe some people in a room. We have a nice group of people joining us today. I'd like to ask Desiree, my colleague, who's here up on the screen, to go ahead and introduce herself. So Desiree.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Desiree Moore. I'm the Director of Marketing and Strategic Growth here at Peregrine. Like Paul, prior to coming to Peregrine, I spent about 8 years of my career in education, mostly higher education as administrator or faculty member. So Paul and I have a lot in common as far as our experience. His is a little bit longer than mine, but
yeah,
but we're so excited to be here with you today.
That's why it's this way. Yes, so yeah, well, great, Desiree, thanks. And it's great to be working with you on today's webinar. We have a lot of good things to share. So again, thanks for joining us on this presentation on academic leveling. Today we'll be discussing how to build foundation knowledge for your incoming possibly MBA, DBA, MS, MSc students, what I call postgraduate programs. That's kind of the term we use globally for people who are beyond their undergraduate and studying in after they finished their undergraduate program. Additionally, we'll be sharing some of the research and analysis that we've recently completed that looks at the differences that academic leveling might make on increasing learners' retained business knowledge. We use student and learner interchangeably throughout this presentation, so it's just people who are in the process of building their knowledge in an academic program. So as I mentioned, we have a lot of people attending, so we unfortunately can't open everybody's mic and have an exchange like we would with 10 or 20 people. So we will keep the microphones muted during our presentation, except for the two of us. But we would like you to participate. And there are several ways that we invite you to participate. We will be having a couple of poll questions, 3 poll questions that give us an opportunity to find out a little bit more about our audience, what kinds of things are happening in your programs. There is a question pane you'll notice in the platform that we're using, GoToWebinar. There's a question pane, so you can certainly write in a question there. We will have time towards the end of the presentation to review some of those questions and answer as many as we can. If we can't get to them, we of course will be writing you back directly. Again, also I'd like to add that I'm also interested in comments that people have about the material that we're presenting, or comments in general. I learn a lot that I add to my general knowledge, and also for future activities with our partner schools or with institutions. So if you have a comment to make about what we're discussing, it's also very useful for us to build our knowledge. And of course, there's the opportunity to contact either Desiree or myself, and there's general information at the end that you can reach out to Peregrine directly.
Yes,
So,
and then we also have
sure.
Kathy on the line. She's one of our team members, and she is monitoring the question and answers to make sure we get all of as many as we can answered. So
Okay.
she's here, and you may hear her come on towards the end of the presentation and let us know if there's any questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, so welcome Cassie, she's there somewhere. So glad to have Cassie with us. So let's get right to it. First, I'm not sure about your specific program, but most graduate programs don't require, business programs, undergraduate, graduate business programs, don't require an undergraduate business degree to be admitted. This is a really important strategy because it enables a much more varied class, a cohort of students. And that is an important thing to have in your postgraduate programs, a good, varied, multidisciplinary background of the students who are coming into your graduate programs. A little bit less important in undergraduate because there's certainly, obviously, students who are coming in from high school might not have, the same, backgrounds or very similar backgrounds. But for graduate programs, it's nice to make a nice selection of people from different backgrounds. When I was director a long time ago, when this here was a little less gray, a lot less gray, I was director of admissions at Clark University's Graduate School of Management, a nice school outside of Boston. You might be familiar with them. And I was director of admissions, and my team and I always strived for a very varied class as we went through applications of people who are, interested in attending our MBA program. We looked for students with STEM undergraduate degrees, as well as those with degrees in the humanities, and of course, students who had business undergraduate degrees. This always provided a really nice balance that the faculty and students appreciated. The students we found really thrived because they brought in a multitude of perspectives. However, this really posed a problem as well because undergraduates who had majored in business always came into the MBA program with far higher levels of core business knowledge, core business courses that they had taken on the undergraduate level. Of course, if you've studied chemistry or art history, you wouldn't have the same knowledge. So as not to put the non-business students at a disadvantage, we had a number of ways to provide this fundamental or background knowledge in business subjects prior to entering the program. Because of course, a faculty person doesn't want people at extreme differences. You accept some, but you don't want to have to struggle with teaching some basics when you're in a graduate program and that the expectation is you at least have some of it. So we often put in different types of tools to build that knowledge, which meant sometimes more class time for students who didn't have that, certain prerequisites before stepping into one of their regular classes. We often would require students to demonstrate their knowledge through possibly waiver exams or doing other coursework elsewhere within the university or within other universities. So we had a number of different tools that we used to sort of build that sort of gap, if you will, in the knowledge. So this lack of knowledge of fundamental concepts is what we consider the gap in business education. And that's through no fault of the students coming into the program. It's just making sure that that gap is sort of narrowed. If you've ever been to London, watch the gap, and this is what we tried to do. We watched that gap to narrow the difference between our undergraduates who had business, or people coming to the program who had undergraduate degrees in business, and those who did not. Now, I'm going to bring up my first poll question here, because I'd like to see what, if you're are familiar with programs in your institution. I'm going to bring up my first poll question, see if I can launch the right one here. So there's a poll question that should be coming up. And this poll question basically asks, how does your program bridge this gap in student knowledge prior to them entering a program? So a postgraduate program. So maybe you offer some things like fundamental courses, or perhaps there's the requirement to provide some type of proof that students have taken some prerequisites. Thank you for answering. I see people already answering. Continue to answer. That would be great if we get as many as possible. Some schools use a mix of items, and some institutions don't actually have a formal process. It's a process, but it's not a formalized process. This is what you must do. These are the things you have to do. This is the number of classes that you're sort of implementing that in your program. So I can see that we're almost at 100% of our guests who have completed the poll. So great. All right. So let me just read off these responses to you so that we can see. The number one response is you use a mix of these, which is, well over 40% of the people responded use some type of mix. Now, the next is using somewhat less, not a formal process, but something in place. I think I can now close that out. And then we have some who offer foundation courses, and then next is they provide some type of proof. So it looks like actually this is a nice spread. I'm not surprised to see this type of spread in a response, which means that you're aware you need to do something. You need to do something one way or another, whether it's formal or informal, a mixture of things. And it looks as though that the group itself understands the importance. So, and I'm going to talk about that importance here on my next, if I can get my next slide to come in. And it's important to keep in mind that this is a part of most regional, institutional, and programmatic accreditors. They include in their standards the requirement that you admit students that have the capacity, if you will, or the aptitude to succeed. So if you're admitting undergraduates without business majors into your postgraduate programs in business, you can't just let them sink or swim. Well, I hope you're not, but instead you're expected to provide them with some form, some way of building this foundation of knowledge that puts them on par with students who have had some of that undergraduate work in business. This even applies to schools that have an open admissions policy, which sometimes schools would think that no, everybody comes in, tries to build their skills as they're in the program, but in fact, the accreditors don't distinguish between open admissions or competitive admissions policies with regard to this this requirement. So therefore, in the eyes of accreditors, putting into place some type of process to build missing or gaps in foundation knowledge is not simply a nice to have, but something that you really need to pay very close attention to. And it's in the interest of your students, and it's in the interest of the faculty, because you do want students to succeed in your program. That's that's what we're doing. We're looking forward to helping our students move through their programs successfully. But it's important to keep in mind that there is an accreditation relationship here with the notion of building a bridge to the gap that they might have. Now, with that in mind, I'd like to explore a solution on how you might consider the bridge or bridging this gap in knowledge for students entering your postgraduate programs in business. Now, the term academic leveling is just that. It's to bring students up to an adequate level of knowledge so that they can comfortably take courses in their graduate degree programs. The goal is to really equip them with some knowledge. Of course, it's not going to be all of the knowledge that your undergraduates in business will get, but some of the knowledge, the most basic fundamentals that they need, that students who have had an undergraduate degree in business have. So it's also important to keep in mind that all learners are different. I'm sure you know that. I'm not sharing anything new, and you should see them as being quite different. And so you may have adult learners who, after being away from school, may need to refresh their knowledge. And that holds true even for undergraduates. And I'll explain in a bit how some of the schools that I work with see that as an important component to help refresh this knowledge, even for those who may have had background. Again, when admitting students into an academic program, it is important to look at their previous academic work and professional work as well. So this is the notion of sort of how to bridge that gap and the solution that we can provide with regard to that. So we're going to take a look at some learning modules specifically designed to help support the building of these foundation or fundamentals of what we often call common professional components. And I'll stop here to explain that I use interchangeably throughout business knowledge, fundamental business knowledge, business foundation, common professional components. I use this interchangeably because it's referred to in a lot of different ways. I just want to make sure that we're all sort of on the same page with how that, the language that we use around that. So and I have here common professional components. So what I'd like to share with you is that Peregrine has developed 16 online modules in the key areas of business knowledge, and I'll be sharing the list with you. A key feature and an important feature is that these modules are designed to assess at the beginning and at the end of the module to ensure that students have retained what they're expected to learn. Otherwise, the purpose of leveling is for naught. I mean, the retention is important. One of the missions that we have as educators is to ensure that students retain what is being taught. And hence, over the last 20 years, we've really seen a change to student-centered teaching, meaning that we're really focusing on, are they retaining what's happening in the classroom? And that happens better, obviously, if we're providing them with some of those fundamentals that they need to succeed. Now, I've worked with a lot of schools that have used these modules in several different ways, and just share with you some of these examples. For example, the modules can be used for requirements for applicants wishing to enter a postgraduate program, either as a package or individually. One school that I work with here in Paris assigns all admitted students a set of modules that must be completed prior to attending their first class in the DBA program. They have a Doctor in Business Administration. And so they want everyone to have the same prerequisite regardless of their backgrounds, because obviously DBA, you're going to have a lot of professionals, people out of school for a long time, and people who don't have backgrounds in business. But this is a requirement. They select the modules that they find most important, and they require their incoming students who have been admitted to take these required background module courses. However, they do provide students who have had 90% or better on the pretest. Remember, there's a pretest and post-test. The pretest to be exempt. So 90% is a pretty good score, so they can move on to the other modules. Another school I work with in Geneva, Switzerland, assigns very specific modules depending on the student's background. They look at those, where those gaps might be, and they say, okay, these are the ones that we want you to take. So it's not the same for every student, they're different. But they do make all 16 modules available for students who wish to refresh their knowledge. And they find that even in that case, they have students who voluntarily take modules because of the benefit they want to get from having an advance on, maybe the knowledge that they didn't have, or refreshing it. So there's another option is looking at selecting those modules that they want students to have, and they've even found students, as I said, who have business undergraduate degrees enrolling in this idea to refresh their knowledge. Yet another program that I work with in Dubai in the Emirates has found that many of their this is a part-time executive program, for a part-time executive MBA program, and they have found that the students themselves want to complete more than one of the modules that they've been selected. So they find that with these executives, for example, the marketing director might need help with core concepts in finance. So there's the opportunity to mix and match different ways depending on what your objective is and what your incoming students might look like. And there are a lot of different different types of models out there of programs and how they operate and what the objective is to bring them up to the level that they might need. Now, here's the list, as you can see, of the different modules that we provide, make available to schools that want to help bridge this gap. And as you can see, we're focusing on those core competencies, and you'll notice ethics and leadership and global dimensions of business, OB and economics and marketing. For the most part, these are those professional components of a degree program in undergraduate, which most students will have seen in an undergraduate program, and which they will be seeing in a graduate program one way or another. These are not super advanced. That's why they're designed to build and bridge that gap that you might have. Now, I'm talking about, of course, postgraduate students, but I'm sure you can see from this list that even undergraduates might need some additional coursework. And there are schools that do implement this as an added component to an undergraduate program, because it covers these disciplines in ways that students actually use as a reference while they're in the program. So it's important to keep in mind that these modules are written by subject area experts. The people that we bring on board as consultants are often our partner schools, as well as others who come in and develop these modules based on what the experience is across many different courses in marketing and many different courses in finance. So it's it's a combination of looking at what would be considered the baseline knowledge in these areas. So you'll find a nice balance of what because I'm in Europe, so obviously issues like communication or marketing has to be adapted across the globe, so that the subject area experts look at the material from many different ways in which this is offered in an undergraduate program. So it's not just one marketing course, Kotler 101, but many others. Now, as I mentioned, the way that this works is that all modules start with a pretest, which can be really helpful for students because they get to understand their own strengths and weaknesses right from the start. And as I mentioned, some institutions can use this pretest as a means by which students can test out of the module and even move on. Here you see a screenshot of what a sample question looks like. There are 20 questions in the pretest, and you can easily follow your students' progress on your client administration site, which I'll explain later. So you have access to all of the progress that your students are making as they go through these modules, and you get to see how they've done on their pretest, how they're progressing in the different sections of the module, and also obviously their post-test. In the post-test, the post-test takes place once the students have completed all the sections in the module. Keep in mind that I'm talking about post-test and pre-test here. Throughout the module, it's divided into these sections that are written by our subject area experts that bring students step by step through the learning process. So there are review quizzes, which can be used to measure the progress, and students can go back and review the sections as many times as they want if they don't understand something. So remember, this is really to reinforce learning. It's not just assessment for assessment's sake, but to really build and retain that knowledge. As I mentioned, it's the purpose is retention, not just to assess them, to make sure that they can sit into that graduate level marketing class. And perhaps this is a good time to mention that students, once they've completed the module, have 2 years from the time they started it to use the module. And this is a wonderful feature that students really appreciate, because they use it as a reference tool, and they can go back time and time again and use the material in these modules to kind of reinforce. Might be, oh, I have to do a marketing plan and I have to do marketing segmentation. The teacher's not covering that in the class because I'm expected to know it, but the module does cover that. So it's a nice way to reinforce that baseline knowledge, and they can use this again and again within 2 years of the time they've started it. So all the modules are available online and available on all mobile devices. So our digital natives are right at home. And even though I wasn't born as a digital native, I can get myself through some of these modules. I know that might be surprising, but I can. It's not just millennials and future generations that kind of can successfully do online courses. Some of us old baby boomers can also. So at the end, students, once they've completed this, can receive, or they do receive, what's called a completion certificate. And the certificate provides all the results in a summary form. It breaks down all the sections and how well students have done in each of the sections. And students really appreciate the certificate because it's a very positive motivation, because it shows success, but it also shows areas that should be reviewed again, which with the schools that I work with, they find that students really like to add this to this completion certificate to what we call here their student portfolio, which is very common. Students often put together the material that they've done, the papers they've had, or reviews that they've received in a portfolio, including certificates, which includes obviously their transcripts, but in Europe we call it the diploma supplement. It's actually an official document which is used across the European Union, and this is a nice document that gets added to that. But of course, many countries use a different format, and we encourage students to put this as part of, especially if it's done well, a completion certificate in their portfolio. As I mentioned earlier, you have access to the progress that students have via our client admin site, which is extremely user-friendly. And even though we provide full training that covers all the different functionalities and reports, it is a very intuitive, it has a very intuitive interface that enables you to launch right into the data. So, you have the opportunity to generate your own reports, see the progress, and keep track of your individual students. Here's an example of an individual student report. Lots of numbers there, but we provide this in raw data, but also in nice report forms. So you can see each section, how students have done in each section. You can collect it on their individual progress. And you also can look at the entire cohort. You can look at it over a number of years. You can look at it comparing different types of cohorts. when I was working as the director of this admissions, we often had feeder schools and into our MBA program. So it would have been interesting to see how my different feeder schools did relative to the other feeder schools. So use it as a comparison. I could have actually added, a column where I could see how my schools as feeder schools did in terms of the students' results. Now, we also have reports that show, of course, your post and pre and post test scores. Here in blue is the pre-test, and the yellow is the post test. Obviously, your objective is to see really high scores on the post test, that you can rest assured that the students have developed that baseline knowledge, which is what you really want in the program. And we have a number of different reports that allow you to understand your cohort as well as your individual students, as I said, in terms of their pre-test and post-test, as well as a comparison between cohorts if you're interested in looking at that. So sort of cap this, school officials are able to see these modules as the possibility to improve foundation knowledge for students who need it to succeed in their transition from undergraduate to graduate. It helps develop learning accountability, and this has become really important in our growing dependence of online learning. We know that through COVID, we have really moved far ahead on our online learning, and this really helps create that accountability when it comes to online learning, which is one of the challenges that comes with online learning. It enables faculty to teach really more effectively because faculty are able to teach the requisite level, which is really critical, and it really helps with learner retention, and that's greatly improved generally when they're able to build this knowledge prior to entering the program and then actually use the module as they work through their graduate program. So just a quick overview. I've hit my my 30-minute time, and I'm going to actually now ask I have actually one more poll question. We're going to take a quick look at my illustrious colleague Desiree is going to take a look at some of the research that we've done, and I'll bring Desiree in, but I'm going to ask a poll question because there is an interesting question here, and let me make sure that I bring my next question up. I'll launch it, and you can, oops, did I close it too quickly? I think I did. I don't know how to relaunch that.
Well, just give me a moment. I might be able to do it. So the question, yeah, go ahead and talk about the question, and I could.
Yeah, if you can relaunch that. The question is, I mean, even just to think about it, I clicked on it twice too fast. I think that might have been what happened. So the question is, what impact do you think leveling courses might have on student success? I don't think we can relaunch it though. But just think about this as Desiree goes through her presentation. Do you think that this is going to be a significant impact, somewhat of an impact, minimal, or no impact? So Desiree, I think because I clicked on it twice too quickly, I closed it, so I'm not able to reopen.
Nope, that's okay. I have a solution, I think. So, so just one moment. Oh, don't. Okay, hold on just a second, please.
She can probably master this a little bit better. That I should have clicked.
Problem solving is a skill, thankfully.
And if we can't, we can just move on because it was really a thought question. How you think that this might have an impact.
Perfect. Okay, so just give me 1 second. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and launch it. I'll go ahead and take, if you'll give me control, Paul, while we're doing this poll, and then go ahead and answer this poll question here. So let us know what you think.
Thank you.
And so I'm now in charge, right? So I'll go ahead and share my screen while everybody answers the poll question. I need you to turn it over to me, Paul.
I'm not doing that, I guess.
No. Oh, it says
I
I'm the
can.
presenter,
Okay.
but I can't do it. So you might need to take it back and share your screen,
Yeah, I think
walk
I'm
me
going
through the
to.
rest of the slides. Thank you.
There
All
you
right.
go.
So, okay, perfect. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. So it says that 52% of you thought it was very significant, which we're very happy to hear, and 48% said somewhat of an impact. And so I actually am going to share with you about 6 years of data. We went ahead and did some analysis of how academic leveling impacts retained knowledge and just student success overall. And I'm really excited to share this with you. All right, so
I made you presenters, so you should be able to move your slides around.
perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my second screen. And you should be able to see it now. Is that accurate? Perfect. All right. If you can't see it, just let us know.
We see it.
Okay, so we're going to skip through this. All right, so what we did, this is the sample and some information about the demographics of the students that we conducted the analysis on. So the analysis is over a 6-year period, and so the data collected over the past several years with academic leveling modules, we grew curious if there was a correlation between student success and academic leveling when students use our modules. And I'll tell you a little bit about the data collection and what we found. We were able to look at data from 17 schools over a 6-year period. The schools studied have been utilizing our summative knowledge-based outbound business assessment. So it's just a summative business assessment used at the end of the program for 2 years before the institution integrated academic leveling into their program. So we were able to create kind of a control group in which these were the outcomes of students before academic leveling, and these were the outcomes of students after academic leveling was introduced based on the data derived from that post-exam that happens at the end of the program. And then those in the pre-leveling sample are learners who completed an outbound exam but did not complete leveling modules at the start of their program. The post-leveling sample was defined as those learners who completed an outbound exam at the end of their degree program and did complete the leveling modules at the start of their program. The population included traditional, online, and blended master's degree programs, and schools within the sample needed to have a minimum of 30 completed exams in an academic year to be included in this analysis. Based on the selection criteria, including exclusions made to ensure the validity of the results, the annual sample size for each academic year ranged from 604 to 2,293. So let's look at what it looks like in the short term. Okay, so here you will see the academic leveling modules do increase foundational knowledge in the short term. The gray bars represent the pre-test scores within the module before the learner reviewed the content, consumed the instructional content, and the post-test scores after. And there is a significant difference here. If you look, there's a lot of growth, such as in areas of quantitative research and techniques. And let's look at this just a little bit differently. Here you can see the learners who completed the leveling module showed significant knowledge gain. So this is percentage gain when comparing pre-test and post-test scores. The knowledge gain ranged from 87% to 183%. And we can clearly see that the academic leveling modules have a very strong impact on short-term students' retained knowledge, learners' knowledge. The small area of growth in knowledge, the smallest area of growth in knowledge happened to be marketing, and the highest was operations and production management. Looking at the change in knowledge based on what we know about our learner populations, we assumed that marketing was likely the area that new, graduate students had the most familiarity with before coming into the program. Therefore, areas with high growth are areas where there was the largest gap in knowledge and a limited conception of the subject before coming into their academic program. We also wanted to see if there was a long-term impact. And I think this was very good news story. I'm excited to share this with you. So in our analysis, we decided to use that assessment data I talked to you about with the outbound programmatic summative assessment as a way to measure the impact of academic leveling and retaining learning throughout the program. To do this, we compared it to that pre-leveling sample I told you about. As a reminder, the post-leveling sample was defined by those learners who completed an outbound exam at the end of their degree program and did not complete academic leveling. And the pre-leveling sample is those who completed both the outbound, or not both. The pre-leveling sample is those who completed the outbound and did not complete the leveling modules. So as you can see in the graph, those that did complete academic leveling modules at the beginning of their program scored much higher on the outbound assessment, showing that there is a long-term impact on retained knowledge. Here's another look at the results. You will see the percentage change between outbound exam scores of a master's degree learners who completed module-based leveling program at the start of their master's degree and those learners who did not complete the module-based leveling program. So this is the change, this is the percentage change between the two. And again, we'll notice that the smallest amount of change was in marketing, right? Because students are coming in with a very strong concept of what marketing already is and maybe some marketing principles. So they don't have as much room to grow, but they do have a lot of room to grow in quantitative research techniques and statistics or information management systems. But this is a long-term analysis that shows real results based on using academic leveling. And it was also interesting to separate the data, it was interesting to separate the data based on delivery modality. And we found that online programs resulted in higher retained knowledge compared to traditional and blended. Even further, we found that blended programs tend to have higher retained knowledge compared to traditional programs. So that's just another item of interest. And we asked ourselves these following questions: what, if any, differences exist with student exams based on the delivery modality? And that is what we found. And then we also asked ourselves, does academic leveling have a positive effect on academic quality beyond its immediate use at the start of the graduate program? And without exception, as I just showed you, we found that that is true. So those were the answers to our research questions. So how is academic leveling so effective? That's the question, right? Like, what is it about academic leveling? And there's a couple things that I just want to bring your attention to. Paul did a fantastic job of discussing kind of the key features and how the academic leveling modules work. But I want to share some of the curriculum best practices that we use to make these work so well. We know that for online programs, they have to be engaging. They must contain dynamic and relevant instructional content. Simply reading material is not sufficient for today's learners, and it's not engaging. Also, an effective online environment gives students access to a variety of engaging resources that foster collaboration, deliver content, and support learning. Also, providing multimedia content ensures that there are a variety of ways for learners to absorb the information, which adheres to universal design. Also, we need to give students the opportunity to participate in higher levels of thinking and take action. I call this helping students across the knowing learning gap. Once a student gains new information, they apply it, whether it's in a short online quiz, written discussion activity, or solving a problem. And so as Paul told you, within these modules, after each section, they do a section review. So that way they have an opportunity to apply what they've learned and reinforce those concepts over and over again. Also, learning content should be scaffolded effectively. So introduction, practice, and application. When designing a course and corresponding content, all activities are positioned in a way that students are able to gain foundational knowledge, properly reinforce concepts, and with assistance, master them before moving on to the next concept that builds from that one. I like to think of how we teach math, right? So you probably remember in school learning, addition and subtraction in your very early years. If we did scaffold education, then we may expect a first grader to solve complex algebraic equations before they've even learned or mastered foundational skills, which is kind of an argument for why academic leveling modules are so needed. If I did this to my first grader, because I have one at home, if I gave her an algebraic equation and I expected her to be able to solve that, she, even with assistance, she would not be able to do it, and she would become quite frustrated, and maybe even swear off math altogether, which I would not want. Therefore, when we scaffold our courses appropriately, we act as guides through various levels of knowledge, building one piece on top of another. And as a byproduct, learners develop confidence in their ability to move through the learning process, just like a construction worker whose success is dependent on the appropriate scaffolding being present for their safety at work. This is all to say that Peregrine's academic leveling modules follow best practices within content and curriculum development to provide a dynamic and interactive learning experience. Our modules provide a combination of video, audio, and text. We scaffold information. We guide learners through so that they can build knowledge, and provide quizzes and activities that reinforce concepts so that learners can effectively retain knowledge. And here's just kind of a quick look at what we mean by a variety of media, right? There's video, sound clips, activities, quizzes, so much that is integrated into the modules that we provide. And the learning is quite interactive. And then very easy to navigate, which is part of structuring your content in such a way that it's structured into kind of building blocks, that scaffolding is present. But that is going to conclude our presentation. And we do have a little bit more information for you. Paul, should we take questions now, or should we share with them how to get started?
Why don't we do how to get started, and we'll get back to the questions.
Perfect.
Because we have a few questions that have come up.
Perfect. Okay. So just so you know, we make it really simple for higher education professionals. We were just talking about this before the webinar, to integrate our services into their programs. We know that in higher education, there's a lot of committee meetings, right? There's a lot of policies and red tape. And when it's time to make a change, or you want to make a change, it can be difficult. And so what we've done is we've made it as simple as possible on our side to help you. And we genuinely believe that we are your thought partners, and we are here to help you through. So all Peregrine services and programs can be easily integrated into your learning management system, or we can also build for you a school branded microsite that is password protected for students to be able to access their learning materials, whatever is best for you. Often schools will sell the modules through their university's bookstore, just like a book. They just purchase codes. Institutional purchase with monthly invoicing. The nice thing about that is that, let's say that you adopted 3 modules that you really needed, and you thought that you would have 30 students, but you ended up only having 20. We purchase based on, or we invoice based on actual numbers used, quantities used. So if you say we think 30, but then 20, we only invoice you based on what you used. And then there's learner purchase through self-registration. That's where maybe we integrate into the learning management system, and then the student goes in to register for their module, and a window pops up collecting their payment information, so the learner can do it that way as well. Also, as far as pricing, all of our pricing is based on number of learner hours and the annual expected quantities. As your thought partner, will lend the expertise of our team to create a solution that addresses your unique challenges, goals, and timeframe. We're always here to provide a free consultation to listen, learn a little bit about your program, understand the challenges that you're experiencing, and then offer you some possible solutions and build you a proposal of sorts. So if that's something you're interested in, we are definitely here for that. I'm going to ask one more poll question, and then once we complete that, we'll go ahead and get to questions. So I'll go ahead and launch that right now. And what I want to know at the end of this is, would you like to receive our white paper on academic leveling? It's not published yet. It should be coming out this month, but we did do a white paper that gives you a more in-depth look at a lot of the data that I covered today, and it's really quite amazing. Or would you like a consultation meeting? Which just means that after this webinar, what I'm going to do, or Paul is going to do, is we're going to email you in the next 48 hours and say, this is a link to our schedule. Feel free to book an appointment with us, and we'll have a great conversation. So I'll just give you a moment to answer that question or that poll, and then once you are done with that, we will get to questions. All right. Wow. Okay. Well, we will be reaching out to those of you with our white paper once it's published, and then we will also be reaching out to those of you who asked for consultation, and we're very excited to meet with you. Oh, some more people are voting, so maybe I should just hold off for just a second.
Yeah, you can choose both if you want, or just one.
And of course, if you change your mind down the road on anything, you'll receive an email from us within the next 48 hours. So you can just, of course, respond and say, I've changed my mind and I want this other thing, and we would be there for you. So that just allows us to be a little bit proactive. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll right now. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and here's our contact information. Of course, if you would like it, you can always reach out to us there, or you can respond to us as when we contact you. It's time for questions. Kathy, are
Actually, I
you
have
online?
I am. Good morning, Desiree. Good morning, Paul. It looks like one of our attendees has left, but I will ask the question anyways. It says, I am hoping we would all be sent the recording. And so if anyone on the chat has read that, if you could answer that for them.
Absolutely, yes. I'm assuming that's probably why they left. They ran out of time. Yes, we will send you the recording. And so the link to that will come in your follow-up email.
Perfect. The next question is from Paula. Can this be used as a type of assessment measure?
Maybe I'll take that one because I do a lot of work on assessment data and learning outcomes. That's a really good question. Now, there's a couple ways that you can consider this as an assessment measure. Since it is, the student can take the post-test twice, meaning that they can, go back and redo it and then take that post-test. It doesn't work as a pure direct assessment because you can't change the student's degree. If you're using Peregrine offers a number of direct assessment tools. Our business assessments are based on 13 different topic areas, which are used as tools to assess learning outcomes, and students can't take the test more than once, and they don't have a chance to go back and redo questions or that type of thing. It's a pure assessment of direct measure. However, this could be considered an indirect measure of student assessment measure, because you're asking the student to do this. Now, again, it's not a pure assessment because really the idea here is to evaluate a gap in knowledge. However, as I say that, I'm thinking about the way that I might use this even as a direct measure. If I did the pre-test and post-test and I looked at, and it was just one post-test, they didn't do it twice. If I looked at longitudinally the increase, I might be able to take into consideration, loosely speaking, this as an assessment of, of student knowledge. But you're really trying to assess a program when you're looking at assessment. So again, I'm trying to find an avenue here, but I think it's probably best to see this as, just what it's designed for is purely improving students' skills so that they can successfully take a graduate level class. So I put a sort of rounded, or maybe there's some ways. So I guess that's a really indirect way of saying maybe you could, but not the best tool. I think our tools that are designed are our assessment tools, our pure assessment tools, which are used by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of schools across the globe for exactly the assessment.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, Kathy?
Well, Paula says, thank you, Paul, for answering the question. And then you already touched base on this, but the last question is, and the cost per student is?
Okay, well, I'll address that a little bit more in depth. The reason we didn't say this is the cost per student, because it does change, because we do give some significant package and quantity discounts, especially for academic leveling modules. And so that's why, you know, of course, one module per student starts out at the price, the highest price is $49, right? But of course, like I said, we give significant quantity and package discounts, especially if a school adopts 8 or more, or already is utilizing some of our services, our assessment, and they have those quantity numbers already. That goes into the cost of the academic leveling modules and impacts what your cost would be. So if you would like some more information on what it would cost for your institution, just based on what your needs are, based on the quantities you'd be using, and based on whether you're currently a client or not, let us know, and we would be happy to build a proposal or give you a quote.
Now, there's another question that's not been asked, but comes up often when I'm talking to institutions about these modules. One question that comes up is, if we want to track students who are coming into our program, their how they're doing in the pre-test, how they're doing in the different sections, how they've done on the post-test, then integrating that as, you know, being purchased via the school, or you having them use the bookstore and they're part of your, you know, what we call part of the client admin site, then that's easy to manage. And one way of doing that is to integrate it into some type of, you know, aspect of your academic program. However, there is the opportunity to make this available without having you being the tracker, so that students can individually purchase this. So you can decide that you advise students, you don't have to require it, but advise students to do this, and not integrate it into the way you're assessing their progress as a group or that type of thing. So schools often wonder, well, can I just tell the students, well, you know, you might want to do this just to build your skills, when it doesn't, you know, if you're doing it that way, it's separate from using the client admin site, because it's an individual student purchasing that on their own. So there's a couple of ways in which schools do that. They, as I mentioned, you know, there are some schools which specifically assign this, and some say, here's the website, you can click on it and take it on your own. You can, you know, that's your access if you're interested. So there are a couple of ways of doing that. Another question that comes up is, how long is this going to take to get through these you know, these modules? Is it reasonable if I am requesting students to do 5 modules before coming into a program? How much time should I be giving them? Well, in general, it's a 4 to 6 hour time that it takes a student to get through these. So you just work yourself backward. If you're expecting students to do this and you're admitting students in a fall or a winter or a spring session or a summer section, make sure that you space that so you have enough time, but it's usually 4 to 6. Now, that being said, working on this side of the planet with non-native English speakers, I often advise schools to give a bit more time, because obviously they're written in English, they're written, you know, with, you know, a certain level of English that you would expect students to be able to master. So if you have non-native English speakers, which exist in the United States as much as they exist here in Europe, or maybe even more, I don't know, the thing to consider is to maybe give a little bit more time in terms of your planning. So I would up that maybe to 8 or 9 hours if necessary. Not always the case. Some students get through them much more quickly, where others will take the time because of the language difficulty, if they have that language difficulty. So, you know, keeping in mind there are a couple of different methods of implementing it into your school, making it more formal. We notice that a lot of schools do this informally. Just ask them for the certificate after they've completed it. It's not something that you're managing. They have to manage it, the payment, and giving you a certificate, or integrating it into your learning management system of somehow. And then again, taking into consideration the the time that it takes. And another question that often gets asked is there, can I select all of them? Do I have, can I choose just one or two or three? Yes, the flexibility here is designed for you to look at your needs and choose those that you think best represent what your needs in your academic program is. You saw that list, 16. You may not be teaching in all those areas, so there is a lot of flexibility in choosing that.
Yes, thank you, Paul. Yeah, and I also wanted to mention that a lot of schools don't use this as a prerequisite for getting into the program. I mean, we do have a lot of schools who do. Some schools will embed it throughout their, maybe the first semester for incoming graduate students who do or do not have a undergraduate business degree or have been out of school for some time, or they'll build like a boot camp, a course that, has all of the modules that they want. And so there's so many different ways to do this. It just depends on what your needs are, how your current academic program is structured. So if you came to us and you said, this is how our program is structured, we would like to use leveling modules, how could that look? Of course, we would help you figure that out. But any other thoughts, Paul, before we sign off?
No, we're looking forward to sunny weather here in the next few days. So we have a blooming Paris. I hope in your part of the world you've got the same, some spring coming, and looking out the window, it's still bright out. So again, really nice to have everybody joining us today, and we'll be back in touch. Thank you, Casey, for keeping an eye on the questions. And of course, Desiree, it's always great working together with you.
All right, thank you, Paul. Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.